up on NEWSCENTER tonight. We will never go back to the past, and we cannot go back. President Moon Jae-in shows strong determination to resolve North Korea's nuclear deadlock through dialogue before his summit talks with U.S. President Trump set for April 11th. In the red for 4 consecutive months, South Korea's exports fell in March compared to the month before, prompting the government to come up with better strategies for the nation's falling trade volume. Supermarkets, department stores, and large shops are banned from handing out plastic bags to customers starting today. We went to the markets to see how things went on the first day. These stories and more coming up now. Good evening to our viewers in Asia and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-dan in Seoul.
And I'm Noaram. Thank you, as always, for joining us this evening. Now, let's start with some more strong determination coming from the presidential office. President Moon Jae-in says both North Korea and the United States are determined to continue talks on the regime's eventual denuclearization.
Speaking to his top aides ahead of South Korea-U.S. summit next week, President Moon said neither side wants to go back to the way things were before negotiations began. We begin with Arirang's senior political correspondent, Shin Se-min.
President Moon Jae-in's assessment of the current North Korea nuclear diplomacy is that both Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are committed to continuing dialogue, despite the failure to reach an agreement at the summit in Hanoi in February. President Moon also said that his upcoming trip to Washington is the product of efforts by the allies to help revive the momentum for nuclear dialogue at an early date.
이번 한미 정상회담은 어떤 난관이 있어도 한반도 평화 프로세스를 반드시 성공시키겠다는 우리 정부의 일관된 원칙과 대화를 지속해 북미 협상을 타결하겠다는 트럼프 대통령의 확고한 의지가 만난 결과입니다.
The South Korean leader also directed a message at Pyongyang, saying that he hopes the North responds to such collective efforts by Seoul and Washington and expressed a strong will in pushing through it with his peace drive.
우리는 결코 과거로 돌아가지 않을 것이고 돌아갈 수도 없습니다. 평화와 번영의 한반도를 바라는 우리 국민과 세계인들의 염원을 실현하기 위해 트럼프 대통령과 함께 길을 찾겠습니다. 막힌 길이면 뚫고 없는 길이면 만들며 함께 나아갈 것입니다.
He said the peace process is a journey taken by the two Koreas and the U.S., and that it would be rather strange if there weren't any difficulties along the way, especially when the path had not been successfully covered in the past 7 decades. All in all, the president's message remains unchanged despite the ups and downs over the course of the denuclearization talks. He's hoping that his meeting with President Trump next week will help bring the two major players in the nuclear negotiations back talking again. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, with just 10 days left until what could be another historic summit between Presidents Moon and Trump, the top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. are also holding an array of meetings.
Our Park Hee-jun now walks us through the significant meetings we should keep tabs on prior to the April 11th summit.
The second deputy chief of the National Security Office, Kim Jong-un, is in Washington to discuss the agenda for the upcoming Moon-Trump summit with his counterpart Charles Kupperman.
It's my first trip to the U.S. since taking this post. I'm here to fix the agendas for the summit with my NSC counterpart on Monday.
Kim will also meet members of Congress to share the stance of the South Korean government, as well as ask for their support in the ongoing peace efforts on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea's Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do is also set to meet acting U.S. Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan the same day to draw up defense strategies to help revive the denuclearization talks. This will be the first meeting between the two since Shanahan took up the role last December. They're expected to review their latest Dongmyeong joint exercise that replaced the larger-scale key resolve exercise and discuss the direction of future combined drills. Also on the table is the eventual transfer of wartime operational control to South Korea, and they're likely to go over the progress made on implementing the inter-Korean military agreement signed by the two Koreas in Pyongyang last September. Last week, Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa also had a face-to-face with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
We share the same priority of maintaining the momentum in North Korea-U.S. dialogue. We need to keep watching the Northeast movements.
It's widely seen that the upcoming Moon-Trump summit will show their strong bilateral ties and dispel any concerns of a weakening South Korea-U.S. alliance. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, after his visit to the United States, South Korea's nuclear envoy, Lee Do-hun, stopped off in Tokyo to meet with his Japanese counterpart on Monday. The two exchanged evaluations on the current stalemate between North Korea and the U.S. and promised to work closely together. This comes amid Pyongyang and Washington continuing to openly give their takes on the failed Hanoi summit. North Korea says it wanted a gradual rollback of its nuclear program in exchange for the partial removal of sanctions at each step. The U.S., meanwhile, is asking Pyongyang to take denuclearization steps with an overall roadmap in exchange for sanctions relief. The South Korean military has begun the groundwork for the joint excavation of war remains in the demilitarized zone without North Korea's participation.
North Korea had left South Korea hanging until the very last minute by not responding at all to the South's proposal on the joint recovery operation. Our Kan Hyung-woo has this report.
Monday was supposed to be the start of the main part of the inter-Korean project to excavate and recover war remains in the DMZ. But nobody from the North Korean side has shown up at Arrowhead Hill, the site of the project just south of the military demarcation line. Seoul had sent Pyongyang a list of the team it plans to send to the DMZ site in early March, but there has been no reply. Experts say North Korea is not complying with this part of the September military agreement and is trying to put pressure on South Korea after the Hanoi summit between Kim and Trump did not end with an agreement.
In a sense, North Korea seems to have taken the Hanoi summit into account and is having a lot of thoughts about the implementation of the military agreement. So you could say they are using the military agreement as leverage in diplomacy.
Seoul's defense ministry says it plans to continue getting rid of landmines and carrying out basic excavation work in the Arrowhead Hill area. So if Pyongyang decides to participate in the joint recovery in the future, the two Koreas can start working together. There are concerns that this could mean the military agreement is dead as a whole, but experts suggest it's too early to say that as North Korea has implemented other parts of the military agreement and South Korea should continue with the excavation of war remains.
So what South Korea may do is, as they actually suggested, to proceed with the excavation unilaterally on the grounds that it's a humanitarian issue and should not be subjected to politics.
Both Koreas followed through with the implementation of the agreements to take down guard posts on the border, disarm the joint security area, and conduct joint navigational research of the Hangang River estuary. For the rest of the inter-Korean agreements in the military domain, experts say Pyongyang will use these as leverage in negotiations with both Seoul and Washington. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
North Korea's Deputy Minister of the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office has returned to work after 3 weeks of absence. Seoul's Unification Ministry confirmed Kim Kwang-sung was back at the Joint Liaison Office in the border town of Kaesong on Monday. North Korea has 2 deputy ministers who take turns staying at the office, but neither of them had been present since March 11th, even before the North temporarily withdrew its officers. Around 10 North Korean officers were working at the office on Monday, the same number as before their withdrawal. A Vietnamese woman accused of participating in the killing of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, will soon be released with the charge of murder downgraded to assault. Kim Mo-kyun has the details.
Prosecutors in Malaysia have decided to drop the charge of murder against Vietnamese national Doan Thi Hong, who had been detained for the past 2 years for taking part in the killing of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother, Kim Jong-nam. Media reports say Monday that the charge was downgraded from murder to assault
and that Hwang was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months behind bars, including time already served. The judge reportedly said the decision was aimed at finding a balance between the interests of the public and the interests of the accused. Hwang's lawyer said that under the Malaysian law, she could be freed as early as the first week of May due to a 1/3 term reduction for good behavior.
Now, as far as the one is concerned, we are happy because ultimately she can go home within a month. And AG has reconsidered our representation, prepared to offer an alternative charge, and we are happy with that.
The sentence came 3 weeks after Hwang's Indonesian co-defendant, Siti Aisyah, was set free reportedly with help from the Indonesian government. On February 13, 2017, the two women smeared a lethal nerve agent on Kim's face, which eventually killed him on his way to the hospital. The two have been pleading their innocence, claiming that they were tricked by 4 men into believing that they were taking part in a reality TV prank. Those 4 men, identified as North Koreans, fled Malaysia on the day of the incident. Interpol issued a red alert, but they are still at large. It's understood that the North had ordered the assassination of Kim Jong-nam, who was seen as a threat to Kim Jong-un's power, but Pyongyang has denied it. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in will be holding a special summit later this year with the leaders of the 10 member countries of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And there's a possibility that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could join. The presidential office says the special South Korea-ASEAN summit will take place in the South Korean port city of Busan for 2 days, starting November 25th, marking the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the dialogue between the two sides. The top office also said the summit could include the North Korean leader. Consultations on that will be held with ASEAN, since some member countries have already proposed inviting Kim to the meeting. ASEAN as a group is Korea's second largest trading partner and is also at the center of President Moon's so-called New Southern Policy. Turning to local politics now, South Korea's ruling party is scrambling to get the rest of President Moon Jae-in's nominees for minister posts through parliament after 2 of his picks withdrew. But the opposition is calling for some of the remaining 5 to also withdraw, while demanding that those responsible for the vetting process step down. Today is the initial deadline to adopt reports from their confirmation hearings, a formality before their appointments. Kim Min-ji has more.
It's not an easy path forward for President Moon Jae-in's cabinet picks. Although the National Assembly wrapped up confirmation hearings for 7 candidates last week, rival parties have been at odds over publishing the reports in those hearings, with the opposition bloc calling them unfit for the job. Despite 2 nominees dropping out over the weekend, tensions between the parties remain high. The president withdrew his nomination for New Science Minister Cho Dong-ho for allegedly attending an overseas conference organized by a fraudulent academic group, while Transport Minister nominee Choi Jong-ho dropped out voluntarily for alleged real estate speculation. The main opposition Liberty Korea party has agreed to issue reports on the hearings of 3 of the 5 remaining nominees, but not for SME or Unification Minister nominees. Unification Minister nominee Kim Yeon-chul has come under fire for making controversial and pro-North Korea remarks in the past, and SME Minister nominee Park Yong-sun for refusing to submit documents necessary for the hearing, as well as ethical lapses.
The top office needs to stop nominating candidates based on their favorability to the administration. Despite 2 candidates falling through, there have been no penalties for those who did the vetting. We call for those in charge to resign.
The ruling Democratic Party noted the need to apply stricter rules in vetting of candidates in the initial stages to ensure that inappropriate candidates are screened out from the beginning. It also called on the opposition parties to stop their political attacks and to cooperate in adopting hearing reports for all of the nominees.
The opposition parties can put their opinions in the report if they think the candidates aren't qualified, but they can't refuse to issue the report outright. We call on the opposition to cooperate in getting the reports published as stipulated in the law.
The initial deadline for the parties to publish the reports is Monday, as the law requires the National Assembly to complete the hearing process within 20 days of a formal request.
President Moon can ask again for rival parties to issue hearing reports within the next 10 days. If they're still not issued by then, he can go on to appoint the nominees. However, that will likely spark further political tensions. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
On the economics front, more signs of weakness in Korea's trade numbers. The figure for March showed exports down again on month amid slumping semiconductor prices and slowing Chinese economy. Kim Da-mi has the details.
Korea's exports fell on year for a fourth consecutive month in March. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, the numbers for March fell by more than 8% on year to $47.1 billion.
The main reasons for the slump include the global economic slowdown, China's slowing economy, falling semiconductor prices, and the lower number of working days.
Semiconductor exports dropped 16.6% and petrochemical goods were down almost 11%.
The global economy is not likely to improve immediately, which means it will take some time for South Korea's exports to increase. The country's export situation will improve in the second half of the year with an increase in semiconductor exports.
The country's imports also dropped 6.7% during the same period. In particular, imports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment fell 70% on year as a result of local companies' less active facility investment. LNG imports were also down. In the midst of the country's slow trade numbers, the Trade Ministry has also announced on Monday its plan to improve trade finance for local exporters by giving them access to cash through export bonds. In addition to speeding up the introduction of measures to boost exports, the Trade Ministry will hold an export strategy coordination meeting next Tuesday to discuss ways to improve marketing support for exports. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Starting today, supermarkets, department stores, and large shops are banned from giving plastic bags to customers. And that includes the little ones provided at certain aisles for you to bag items such as fruits and vegetables. Our Oh So-young tells us for many shoppers, it's going to take some getting used to.
Large stores in South Korea are no longer providing single-use plastic bags, in line with a government policy aimed at protecting the environment. The law went into effect on Monday across 2,000 large supermarkets, department stores and shopping malls, as well as 11,000 grocery stores larger than 165 square meters.
So the next time you go shopping, you'll have to bring a reusable shopping bag like this one, or purchase a recyclable paper bag.
Plastic roll bags in particular have been used by Korean shoppers to carry fruit and vegetables and other pick-and-choose items like baked goods. But from Monday, stores caught giving them away will be fined over $2,600. Exceptions have been made for products that can leak or melt, such as ice cream or packs of tofu. For many shoppers, the policy will take some getting used to.
It's so inconvenient. How are we going to carry our groceries now? It's a problem, especially for older people like me.
I try to carry a reusable bag when I can, but sometimes you're in a hurry. I think the policy is too strict.
Other shoppers say they're on board with the ban.
We need the policy for the sake of the environment, our future, and our children.
Environmentalists say the plastic bag ban regulation has been a long time coming. The country has actually banned stores from giving away free plastic bags since 1999 as a measure for environmental protection. But it's clear the law was widely disregarded, with Korea's consumption of plastic bags nearly doubling from 12.5 billion bags in 2003 to 21 billion bags in 2015.
The typical South Korean uses about 420 plastic bags a year, and there's nowhere for these bags to go. In Finland, the per capita average is 4 bags a year. The EU's average is around 200 bags a year, but it's moving to half that number within the next 5 years. So Korea's new policy is a positive and much-needed change.
The Environment Ministry says the new policy could reduce the use of 2.2 billion plastic bags every year. South Korea joins dozens of countries which have imposed bans or taxes on disposable plastics to reduce their detrimental impact on our planet. Oh So-young, Arirang News.
Also from today, big South Korean companies will have to follow the new 52-hour work week or face penalties. There's still some exceptions, though, for certain industries. Or Ko Ryun-hee has more.
In July 2018, South Korea implemented a 52-hour maximum workweek system, meaning workers are legally only allowed to work 52 hours a week, down from the previous 68. This affected around 3,600 firms with 300 or more employees, but almost 150 companies that weren't prepared in time were given some extra breathing room by the government, an extra 3 months. Now the Ministry of Employment and Labor says the grace period has ended. Companies that have 300 or more employees will be penalized if their workers are found to have worked more than 52 hours in a given week. Business owners can face up to 2 years in jail or a fine of up to $18,000. The ministry added companies that are willing to improve the situation can have up to an extra 4 months to avoid punishment. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean all companies with 300 or more employees are required to follow the 52-hour system. 21 types of businesses, including the accommodation, finance, insurance, and food industries, are expected to start abiding by the rule from July. Also, companies that have expressed a willingness to implement a flexible work system will be exempt from penalties until the related law is revised. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Baseball season has begun in Korea, and this year, some of the stadiums have been upgraded with cutting-edge ICT and 5G technologies, bringing fans closer to the action. Our Lee Min-sun takes us there.
An unmanned robotic arm is throwing the first pitch for a local baseball team's first home game of the season. At another stadium, augmented reality sends a dragon flying over the field. Tech is more than a gimmick, though it's giving baseball fans new ways to watch.
With advances in 5G technology, this baseball stadium has added 54 cameras to capture important moments of the game from multiple angles and provide in-depth analysis.
Ultra-high-definition cameras provide simultaneous feed through 5G networks, which enable viewers to watch the game from different angles. Using this mobile app, viewers at home and at the stadium can replay key highlights from the game and zoom in for a closer look. A person sitting in the first base line can enjoy the view from the third base seats or directly in front of the pitcher's mound and even take a peek at the dugout. Cameras track and analyze the movement of the ball and players with motion tracking software, the first of its kind in Asia. It provides detailed information such as the flight course, airtime, and velocity of balls hit into play.
I like how I can use the app to watch from different viewpoints and re-watch run-scoring plays and home runs.
In addition to enhancing the viewer experience, newly installed Finders gauges measure the air quality in different sections of the stadium and sprinkle artificial rain to lower Finders levels.
The biggest advantage of using 5G in sports is that fans can enjoy baseball in a way they have never before. Up until now, people will watch broadcast games, but with our service, they can control what they want to see.
More baseball teams around the country are planning to implement 5G technology to enhance the spectator experience at their ballparks and to also provide more sports-related content. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Ten Chinese troops who died in South Korea during the Korean War will be sent back to their home country later this week. Their bodies were put into caskets in a ceremony today, and another repatriation ceremony will be held on Wednesday at Incheon International Airport. Seoul's Defense Ministry said the identities of the fallen soldiers were confirmed through a months-long forensic identification process. This would mark the 6th repatriation of Chinese soldiers from South Korea. Every household in South Korea with children aged 6 or younger are now able to get a monthly child allowance from the government. The Welfare Ministry said the new law took effect today, with parents able to get nearly $88 for each child. Previously, households in the top 10% income bracket were not eligible for the subsidy. The age ceiling will be increased to 7 in September, benefiting nearly 3 million children. South Korea's first duty-free stores in the arrivals area will open on May 31st at Incheon International Airport. Local firms SM Duty Free and Entas Duty Free have been selected to run them, with products ranging from cosmetics and perfumes to alcohol. As well as creating hundreds of jobs, the duty-free stores for returning travellers would alleviate the inconvenience of them carrying around goods bought before departing Korea. It appears South Korea is still one of the most homophobic countries in the OECD. A recent OECD report shows Korea scored just 2.8 on a scale of 10 for accepting sexual minorities, ranking 32nd out of the 36-member bloc. Though the score is a slight improvement from the previous report, it's still far below the OECD average of 5.1, raising concerns about discrimination against sexual minorities. Iceland, meanwhile, ranked the highest with 8.3. That's your 3-minute news flash. News in depth coming up next.
With the South Korea-U.S. summit now just about 10 days away, the top diplomats and negotiators of the two countries are keeping themselves busy with a series of pre-summit talks. President Moon Jae-in today showed a strong determination to keep the flame of nuclear dialogue alive, saying neither the two Koreas nor the U.S. wish to go back to the past. Will the three sides be able to find an exit from the nuclear deadlock this time? For an in-depth discussion on this issue, Dr. James Kim of the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies now joins us in the studio. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Dallin.
So many pre-summit talks are well underway following the foreign ministers' meeting last week. Top nuclear envoys of Seoul and Washington are meeting this week as well. And defense ministers of South Korea and the U.S. will also hold talks early Tuesday morning. How do you see this busy movements of high-ranking officials, and what do you think would be their top agenda?
I think President Moon has made it clear that he wants to play the facilitator's role here to get the talks back on track. Clearly the ball's on the North Korean side of the court, but I think he wants to get some concessions out of the U.S. to move a bit closer towards North Korea so that Pyongyang could come out of its shell. So North Korea is definitely on top of the agenda, but there are other issues that are outstanding bilaterally if you look at the U.S.-South Korean relations. Extension of the exemption on the Iran sanctions is one. The other is the, the special measures agreement, the burden sharing agreement that South Korea had struck with the United States, earlier this year. It's only in effect for 1 year, so they have to go back to the negotiation table again to try to get a new agreement for next year or possibly even further. And then there's another issue that hasn't been really talked about, Section 232 report on the auto tariff, which the Commerce Department has already presented to the President. The President has about 90 days to respond on this issue, and if he doesn't, then this issue goes away, and the Commerce Department has to do another finding again. But if he does issue an auto tariff, it will impact South Korean exports to the United States.
So North Korea will definitely be on the top agenda, but they do have quite several other important issues to iron out. Now, getting down to specific details, following the South Korea-U.S. foreign ministers meeting last week, we've learned that the two sides have reached a comprehensive agreement, and they found the common ground on the need to resume North Korea-U.S. talks. What exactly do they mean by a comprehensive agreement?
Yeah, so this isn't exactly clear because some of this is coming through from the Korean media and it's not coming through the Foreign Press Corps. So it's not clear to me where this information is coming from. There are two possibilities. One, from what Minister Kang had already said publicly to both the Korean media and the foreign press media, that the U.S. and South Korea has a common understanding about the end objectives of these nuclear talks, that they both want to get denuclearization from North Korea. That's one possibility. The other possibility is this issue, this idea of comprehensive agreement with phased approach on the implementation side for any deal that is struck with North Korea. And it's not clear to me what this means because there's some interpretation going on in the Korean media that suggests the latter interpretation of what Minister Kang was alluding to. But I think this is really splitting hairs because there isn't any formal announcement from either side on this. And so I'm going to go with Minister Kang's earlier statement that there's an agreement between the United States and South Korea about the end objectives of these talks. In terms of how they move forward on that, there's some gap there that needs to be worked out.
Now, U.S. President Trump reportedly was open to easing North Korea's sanctions, given that there is a snapback clause. Snapback clause, simply put, meaning sanctions would be lifted, but also immediately reimposed if North Korea violates any of the agreement. Now, while much attention is on what kind of card South Korea would lay out on the table this time to break this nuclear impasse, do you think this snapback clause could be a useful card for South Korea too? So this was first raised by a high-ranking official from North Korea, that this was something that was raised by President Trump during the Hanoi meeting. And it's not at all surprising to me that they were considering this as a potential option. But as it was revealed by high-ranking officials in the United States after the Hanoi summit, these sanctions regimes are layered on top of one of each other. So if you take one aspect of it out, essentially, the whole sanctions regime is gone. And then the second issue about the snapback side, on the implementation side, it's really tough to get the sanctions back online without a prior agreement to this effect. So snapback, while the idea is an interesting one, from a policy standpoint, it's not clear to me exactly how that would be worked out. So there's still a lot of work there that needs to be done if the two sides are going to agree to this. So while the idea is noble, to me, it's a little bit unclear exactly how you're going to get there. It's a good idea, but it sounds a bit unrealistic. Now, staying with sanctions, Trump made another surprising remark on North Korea, saying that North Korea is now suffering greatly and that additional sanctions are unnecessary at this point. How do you interpret this? So this is fairly consistent position that the U.S. has held out before and also after the Hanoi summit, and even more so after the Hanoi summit, given that Kim Jong-un's only demand during that meeting was sanctions relief. So from President Trump's point of view, sanctions are working. If not, the expectations that are tied to the sanctions are working, and the North Koreans are racing against the time to get a deal that where they could get some relief on these sanctions. So this was something that was raised in the last round when the Treasury designated two entities from China on the shipping side, and President Trump tweeted that he doesn't want additional measures there. And then there were some disagreements about exactly what he was alluding to, whether it was the original Treasury announcement or something else that the U.S. was getting ready for. But overall, I think the president's position on this is that the ball is on the side of Pyongyang's court, and Pyongyang needs to make the next move. And he's not going to make it difficult for Kim Jong-un, that he's going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt so that he comes out to these talks. Now, the mysterious chemistry between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Trump is not fading away, with Mr. Trump once again stating that he and Kim Jong-un, they understand each other. But other top officials in Washington appear firm on the need to continue maximum pressure. How do you assess the current somewhat confusing Washington's North Korea policy? So President Trump has made these kinds of statements in the past where he's alluded to Kim Jong-un as something even more extreme, right? They're in love with one another, that they're great friends. And again, he's not being inconsistent there in the position that he's taken since earlier part of last year when he agreed to the Singapore summit. So after Singapore, he's maintained this position. He hasn't really spoken about Kim Jong-un in a very negative way. And it's his position that he wants to keep the channels open for dialogue. But you're right, there seems to be some gap here, if not a disconnect between the administration officials and the president on this issue. And I'm alluding to precisely that issue having to do with the two designations that Treasury made about a couple of weeks ago, these Chinese entities, that there's a view in Washington that they need to
lay on even more pressure to get Pyongyang to move away from its original position to come closer towards the United States. But again, the president wants to give Kim Jong-un the benefit of the doubt, doesn't want to make it difficult for him. He wants to give him a chance to respond. And so I think that the president wants to stay in the waiting mode, but there's a general agreement here between the administration officials and the president that they want to keep at this dialogue and the diplomacy channel. And they want to see where this goes, that they're not going back to 2017 of fire and fury.
According to Reuters, President Trump handed over a document to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the Hanoi summit, the document which bluntly calls for a transfer of North Korean nuclear weapons and fissile materials to the U.S. Now, some point out that this might have been a major factor that led to the collapse of the Hanoi summit. What's your take on this report?
Well, the president made clear right after the summit in the press conference that he wanted complete denuclearization and that Kim Jong-un would declare everything and put it on the table so that he can give him the sanctions relief that he wanted. So it is not at all surprising to me that he made this kind of a gesture, if you will, or an offer. And whether that led to the break, yeah, well, it did, because North Korea didn't want to do that. And that was fairly clear from the press conference as well. So this is not at all surprising to me. But exactly what he had in there in terms of what he meant by all the fissile materials, because that in itself is a process, identifying the sites and then being able to secure that site and then be able to remove it and then verify whether that actually happened. It's not something that you can do overnight. There are probably multiple sites here we're talking about, some of them that the U.S. knows about and some of which the U.S. might not know about. And then the verification process in and of itself, I think, is going to be a long, arduous march. So while the idea is interesting, and sure, this would have been something that would have been a no-starter for North Korea, as we saw in Hanoi, maybe North Korea needs to rethink the U.S. position on this. And the U.S. also is, I think, reassessing North Korea's views about denuclearization as well.
North Korea broke its long silence on the intrusion at the North Korean embassy in Spain. During an interview with a local news outlet, North Korea's foreign ministry spokesperson called the intrusion a grave terrorist attack and said that North Korea is keeping a close eye on the intrusion. But to me, this sounded a bit toned down given the harsh rhetoric North Korea usually lashes out at the U.S. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's been very measured, even after the Hanoi summit. And we haven't heard anything that's really incendiary coming out from the KCNA or the Rodong Shinmun, right? We saw some incendiary remarks coming from Choi Sun-hee, who's, again, the high-ranking official that I was alluding to earlier. But that's par for the course with Choi Sun-hee. In terms of other officials and Kim Jong-un himself, we haven't heard anything that is really incendiary. And it seems like North Korea is also trying to play this safe and keep that possibility of the talks open for now. Because I don't think they've really made their decision yet whether to come back to the talks or go back to provocations. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Again, the U.S. seems to have a fairly open mind on this issue, but they're, again, very, very strong on their position that, that there's not going to be any sanctions relief without complete denuclearization.
So you think Kim Jong-un is not yet quite ready? He's still mulling his next step. Now, a heavy burden is on President Moon Jae-in's shoulders, who from the beginning asserted that South Korea should play a big role as a mediator. Now, how do you assess the Moon administration's role as a mediator so far, and what kind of strategy do you think South Korea should take to break this nuclear impasse?
So President Moon has stepped in at various points in time over the past year, or a little over a year or so, to get the talks back on track whenever it kind of derailed. And we saw that happen with Choi Sun-hee's remark right after the March announcement about the Singapore summit last year. There were some very incendiary remarks about the U.S. Bargaining position. And then President Trump sends a letter to Congress saying that he's not, well, sends a letter to North Korea and presents it to Congress that he's not going to be going to the Singapore talks. President Moon steps in, with the summit between North and South Korea at the DMZ, and all of a sudden talks are back on track. Singapore happens. We saw President Moon essentially offering to President Trump before the Hanoi summit that South Korea is there to chip in wherever it's necessary to allow for some kind of incentive for North Korea. Hasn't really made an impact on the Hanoi summit. He's now trying to go again on this by meeting with President Trump and talking about some potential, some incentive packages that both South Korea and the U.S. might be able to offer North Korea, or try to get some mutual understanding on exactly how to proceed. Whether this is going to work or it's not going to work, it's not clear to me yet, but the U.S. position since last year hasn't changed on this issue of denuclearization. And it's not clear to me why this visit is going to lead to that. So again, it'll be interesting to watch whether President Moon can convince President Trump to change his position on this, but it's not going to be, it's going to be a very difficult task for him. So again, the ball's going to be back on, the ball is on the North Korean side, but President Moon now has he's trying to see if there's some things that he can do to get the North Koreans back out, to get some concessions from the U.S., or after this meeting, he's going to have to go back and try to initiate talks with North Korea and see if Kim Jong-un is willing to make any concessions on his part. But it's a really, really difficult balancing act for President Moon.
Well, it sure won't be easy, but I truly hope that some progress will be made this time in Washington. Thank you for your perspectives today, Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Dawn.
Well, it's that time in the newscast where we take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's digital platform.
Now, it's no surprise that Korea has a lot of spicy food, which some foreigners and even some Koreans may struggle with.
That's right. And today, Justin from When in Korea, or Wink, tests out a few methods which people can try to handle the heat. Take a look.
Have you guys ever tried Korean food?
I tried tteokbokki.
Okay.
And it killed me.
Alright, the tteokbokki kills you, okay.
Yeah. Even the kimchi was super spicy for me in the beginning.
We'll be helping you guys.
덥게 먹고 헤헷거리면 스트레스가 풀리더라고요.
That's sauce.
약간 고통을 즐기는 것 같아요.
Find out better ways to deal with these extremely spicy Korean foods. Let's go. 매운 음식을 드실 때 좀 도움되는 음식들이 있나요?
유명한 게 있죠. 쿨피스가.
오케이. 쿨피스가 진짜 인기 많아.
삼각김밥 같이 먹으면 좀 맛있는 것 같고.
삼각김밥. 저는 개인적으로 우유 같이. 우유랑
토마토 주스를 마시면은 이게 진짜 진정이 엄청 빨리 돼요.
토마토 주스요?
네.
Did the water help?
Not really. Like
Not
probably
really.
for a second when it was like feeling the cold of the water.
So first we have the two most commonly answered spicy foods here. And yeah, we have each and every single thing that was suggested within the interview. I'm gonna be rating each one out of 10, 10 being the best. First one is gonna be water. I already know it's not gonna help at all. Yeah, it's not helping at all. So water to 0. No good.
Okay, guys. When eating tteokbokki, water doesn't help at all. So just go for the milk. Maybe this is gonna help.
And now we're gonna go with milk. Not bad. I'll give it out of 10. I'd say 5. It relaxes the tongue. Never mind. It still hurts. So it's a 4. We have 삼각김밥. Samgyeopsal actually has tuna inside it and mayonnaise, and I think the mayonnaise, the sauce helps. For the samgyeopsal, 3.5. Okay, so one of the people said something very interesting, and this is one that I'm personally the most curious about. They said tomato juice. Okay, yeah, it's helping. 도움은 되는데, it helps, but it just tastes really bad. It tastes, So I'll rate this, so like a 5. Okay, last but not least, it's kind of like a peach juice. Oh yeah, it's still spicy after drinking this, but this one's definitely up there. I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. But the thing that you need to remember is that none of them got a 10 out of 10. Take that into consideration when you're trying these out. And yeah, thank you so much for watching When in Korea, Wink. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next episode.
Time now to get a check on the weather conditions. A cold snap that started over the weekend has dragged temperatures to negative readings in some places.
Yes, but at least we are free from the choking fine dust. With more, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle, what's the latest?
Well, as you mentioned, the air quality is looking good right now, and it's expected to stay this way for tomorrow as well. The nation will have plenty of sunshine over on Tuesday with some low clouds developing in the afternoon. Beijing will stay sunny the whole day, while Tokyo is expected to be overcast. And checking out the morning lows for tomorrow, Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju, it will reach down to 2 degrees Celsius, while regions far south are expected to wake up to slightly higher readings. And to the afternoon, the daily highs will range between 12 and 15 degrees, Seoul topping out to 12 degrees, Busan and Jeju reaching 15 and 14 degrees respectively. The cooler temperatures won't last too long as warm conditions will return by Thursday with readings above average seasonal norm. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
We'll be back same time tomorrow with more domestic and global news update.